Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz, and this season we will be unpacking real trends, hot topics in the workplace around allyship and inclusion. Our goal is that each week you leave with tangible tools, information, practical strategies that you can take back to allies at your organization. Let's dig in to this week's topic.
How do you build a strategic roadmap for DEI? I get this question a lot. And the reason I think it's so important to underscore the need to think strategically about DEI is because if we don't have a plan, we risk running in the wrong direction. So I like to think about it with strategic planning for DEI. Is when you get in your car, as many of us do now with technology, we plug in the address of where we want to go. It's like our GPS, right? Why don't we do this with DEI? Because what we end up doing is getting in the car and just driving inadvertently in a direction. And this is why some DEI efforts stall out, because they're not tied to a long-term plan. And we know that DEI is a long game. It's a journey, not a destination. And if we don't have clear priorities and expected outcomes, we risk doing the wrong things and not getting the right outcomes. So that's really the quintessential question to kick off an intentional, consistent DEI strategy. And this doesn't have to be a complex conversation. It doesn't have to be days at an offsite or, everyone from the organization getting together. Ideally, that would be lovely, but let's think about what we can actually do. Oftentimes what I do with DEI road mapping activities is we get an hour and a half, usually virtually, especially with teams that are all over the country or world, and we get key leaders in the Zoom room, and we outline the overall strategy. And we think about it really with three key questions. One is what? So what does diversity, equity, inclusion mean? Is that the acronym we're even using? I have clients that use JEDI with J for justice. Or I have clients that still, just call it inclusion or belonging. Whatever words you use, I'm indifferent on it as long as you know what they mean and why they matter at your company. It's also really important that they're connected to your existing cultural values. So if you don't know what your cultural values are, I would start there. You need that before a DEI strategy. But really getting clear on our values. Is it about integrity? Is it about trust? Is it about inclusion or belonging? I love it when they're threaded through. So this is just a core way of how we do business. So road mapping can be done in a variety of ways, but it essentially starts with that what question. What are we talking about here? Is it diversity, equity, inclusion? What do those terms mean to us? And you can be really simple and succinct with those definitions. Then why? Why does this matter to us? And that helps to prevent against the roller coaster ride of DEI investment. Why? Why is this important now? Why is this important for good? And then how? And that's where organizations usually start. And we certainly saw some of those performative allyship approaches in the last few years. So instead of focusing first on the how, start with the what, dig into the why, and then you can spend the balance of that session. So if we do 90 minutes with the leadership team, we usually have some assessment data up front to tee up the conversation. It can be simple questions, but of course there's sophisticated tools that have been, their algorithms have been highly vetted to correlate with inclusion. So I would encourage you, if you can, assess the organization, get some data, make sure it's sliced by dimensions of diversity. Otherwise, it's not going to tell a complete story. You could do focus groups too. You could think about senior leadership perceptions. You could just do the assessment with the core team that's building out the DEI strategy. We do that a lot just to keep it simple at the beginning. Then, there's kind of three key tenets, a what, a why, and a how conversation. And so the what and the why are usually half of the conversation, and the how is the other part of the conversation. So think about it as a foundation. Once we know what we mean, why it matters, then we can roll out the how pieces that tend to be more tactical, kind of that 90-day plan, that year plan. We used to do 3 to 5 year plans, but the news cycle, the uncertainty, we're lucky if we can get a year looking out, which tends to be less strategic, but it is important that we have the ability to forecast this work. We have some reliable data. So all sorts of ways to build out the how with the roadmap. Again, I mentioned assessments, focus groups. If you don't have data, I would absolutely start there so you can get a good pre and post. So you can show the ROI, right? If you don't have data, it's going to be really hard to justify a continual investment. So get at least a pre-assessment so you can post-assess it based on what you do. Then make sure that senior leaders are educated. Education for all employees is important. So, videos, LMS courses, learning management system courses. We had a client recently that did an inclusion month. I thought that was really cool. Kind of that slow drip approach, email communications, newsletters, that kind of thing. Really can be really great education for employees, especially when it's done consistently over time. Inclusive leadership training. We're seeing a lot of companies do that, where a core band of leaders go through an intensive leadership training, much like we would for any type of leadership, but specifically with the filter of inclusion. It can be really powerful. Employee resource groups, of course, ERG programming is a key part of this, and resourcing it. And increasingly, companies are paying people, if it's in addition to their day job, they get paid more, like LinkedIn does, or they divvy up, slice out a chunk of their time so that they can really spend the time on the employee resource group success, because it usually takes several hours a month to plan programming for the leadership team. Cultural celebrations, caveat here, do not let that be the only thing you do. It will come across opportunistic. So cultural celebrations are a part of an overall education effort. Certainly communications support. We had a client that did a Friday fun fact about DEI in their existing newsletter, which I thought was a great way to embed it. And not just fun, but they were, intriguing, not happy messages in there as well. So we definitely don't want to placate diversity efforts. We want to be real. Community involvement is a great opportunity to get involved with the community. DEI headcount, right? Are we going to have a programs person, a manager? I worked with an organization that was like 500 employees, and they had one DEI person, and she was doing all the things from email communications to training to ERG programs. That's a lot of hats for someone to wear. Getting a program manager is going to be a game changer for her. So, do we need to invest more in those resources or outside consultant help? And then bias intervention tools. Really feel compelled, whether that's in the hiring process, the performance review process. Once you have kind of a basket of activities, again, that help address the what and the why of DEI, the how should be living the what and the why out. So then I would, as any good consultant loves a good 2x2, I like the 2x2 of impact versus investment. So I like to have everybody rate the activities based on level of impact to the organization, what's going to move the needle the most, and then how much investment is going to take. So ideally, we would have high impact, low investment prioritized first. Now, there could be high impact, high investment that we might determine has a stronger ROI too, but we certainly would not want to prioritize efforts that have a low impact and high investment, right? So it becomes really clear with the quadrants what you want to prioritize. It makes it really kind of democratic in the voting process. I give people dots and have them vote on their top 3. We map it out. There's lots of different ways you can roll this out to the organization and have them prioritize it too. So that can be a simple survey. But the key is with the how, the roadmap, is that it's, again, tied to the what and the why of our DEI strategy. And then we have a pre and post assessment to measure impact of whatever we decided to do. How are we going to know it's successful? Okay. We need to have a measurement around that. So then we can pivot the next year, because ideally roadmaps are, reviewed, probably tweaked, added to on an annual basis, if not, semi-annually. Thanks, allies, for listening today. Love your thoughts on future topics. So drop me a line, shoot me a question. Happy to dive in future episodes.
Thank you for listening to the Diversity Pivot podcast. My hope is that you walked away with a tangible tool, insight, or information that you can share with other allies on the journey. If you liked this week's episode, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a tremendous amount to us. We'll be back next week with another hot topic.